Look, when everything hits the fan, the opening 72 hours are absolute madness. Panic spreads like wildfire, supermarkets get ransacked within hours, and everybody's still clinging to the fantasy that rescue teams are just around the corner. But it's those initial 3 months. That's the period where illusions shatter completely. Your electricity vanishes, your smartphone becomes a useless brick, and the cavalry isn't showing up. The infrastructure isn't magically recovering in 7 days, and you're not simply waiting this out in comfort. You're completely isolated, and that's when reality truly bites. So here's the harsh wisdom nobody's willing to share: how to actually endure those first 90 days when society has abandoned you. Now listen carefully. There's mountains of preparedness guidance floating around that sounds brilliant in theory. Accumulate freeze-dry provisions, construct an underground shelter, cultivate a vegetable plot, and become self-sufficient off the grid. But here's the unvarnished reality. Beyond 90 days, the majority of that polished advice begins falling apart at the seams. Freeze-dry provisions deplete faster than anticipated. Your vegetable garden won't produce a single harvest within this time frame. And hiding underground indefinitely, that's purely cinematic fantasy. Making it past 3 months isn't determined by whoever accumulated the most equipment or possesses the flashiest tactical gear. It's fundamentally about flexibility. It's about psychological resourcefulness, understanding how to maximize every limited resource you possess. It's about establishing community bonds, identifying who deserves your confidence and who represents genuine danger. And above everything else, it's about unwavering self-control. Because ultimately, enduring catastrophe isn't merely about stockpiling provisions and ammunition. It's about maintaining mental clarity while everything surrounding you descends into disorder. Understanding the critical timeline. Every prepared individual recognizes a fundamental principle, the survival rule of threes. And if you fail to comprehend this framework, you won't survive to see day 90. The framework operates as follows: 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 hours without adequate shelter in harsh conditions, 3 days without hydration, 3 weeks without nutrition. That's the fundamental arithmetic of human endurance. But here's the critical aspect everyone overlooks. Extend this timeline to 3 months, and you're no longer simply battling dehydration or starvation. You're combating total societal disintegration. Let's begin from square one. 3 minutes without oxygen. Most individuals dismiss this casually. I'm breathing perfectly fine. But consider what occurs when electrical power disappears and you're warming your dwelling with a portable generator or combusting firewood indoors. Carbon monoxide silently accumulates, and unexpectedly, you're unconscious while sleeping. Or perhaps a dust cloud, wildfire haze, or even something as simple as being trapped in an enclosed environment without proper ventilation. Oxygen isn't something you consciously consider until it's suddenly absent. That's precisely why the initial step of endurance is perpetual vigilance. Where's your oxygen supply originating from? Can you breathe without hazard? It appears self-evident, yet during emergencies, the self-evident factors claim more lives than complicated scenarios. Next, we progress to shelter. 3 hours in hostile environments can terminate you. Excessive cold, excessive heat, excessive moisture. It's irrelevant. If your physiology cannot maintain equilibrium, you deteriorate rapidly. In a 90-day catastrophe, shelter represents one of your primary concerns requiring immediate attention. And understand this, that doesn't necessarily mean constructing a wilderness cabin or descending into a reinforced bunker. It can be as simple as waterproof tarps, thermal blankets, and proper insulation. If winter arrives and you cannot maintain warmth, it's meaningless if you've stockpiled a year's supply of grain in storage. You won't survive long enough to consume it. Shelter lacks glamour, but it's fundamental survival knowledge. Now, let's extend further. 3 days without hydration. That's the really devastating blow in most infrastructure failures. Municipal water infrastructure collapses. Mechanical pumps cease functioning, and suddenly your faucets run completely dry. Perhaps you filled several containers on the first day, but now it's the sixth day and you're staring at an empty reservoir. In a 90-day breakdown, hydration is absolutely everything. It's not exclusively about consumption. It's about preparing meals, sanitizing injuries, basic cleanliness. Without it, illness propagates explosively.
And merely possessing a modest reserve isn't adequate. You require a comprehensive strategy. Precipitation collection, decontamination, filtration systems, boiling procedures. If you're not prioritizing hydration from the beginning, you're already falling catastrophically behind. Then we encounter 3 weeks without nutrition. This is where the majority of individuals begin experiencing genuine hardship. The typical household maintains less than 7 days' worth of groceries, and by the 5th day, retail stores are completely stripped. By the 3rd week, everyone who assumed they could simply endure is operating on empty reserves. That's when true desperation manifests, and you witness the initial genuine collapse in neighborhood cohesion. Because starvation doesn't merely deteriorate the physical body, it shatters people's ethical foundations. Someone who represented your friendly neighbor 3 weeks prior is now contemplating what provisions you've stored away. And if you believe you can simply distribute snack bars until normalcy returns, reconsider. Once individuals discover you possess provisions, you've marked yourself as prey. And now we arrive at the unspoken element of the survival timeline. 3 months. This represents the phase that virtually nobody adequately prepares for. By day 90, it's no longer exclusively about caloric intake or purified water. It's about absolute systemic collapse. Infrastructure has vanished. Law enforcement exists only in memory. Medical facilities are overwhelmed beyond capacity if they're operational whatsoever. Neighborhoods begin fragmenting dramatically. Certain individuals unite cooperatively. Others embrace violence. And it's not exclusively physical deterioration. It's psychological. Mental exhaustion establishes itself. You've existed in darkness, carefully rationing every morsel, protecting every precious drop. Individuals cease prioritizing survival and begin committing lethal errors, venturing outside after dark, consuming their final reserves, surrendering entirely. That's the hidden timeline. It's not exclusively biological, it's sociological, and it's psychological. 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. Each phase challenges a distinct aspect of your being. The first challenges your situational awareness. The second challenges your preparedness. The third challenges your strategic planning. The fourth challenges your operational security. And the final stage, those 3 months, that challenges your determination to persist when the surrounding world has abandoned hope.
A container of uncooked rice might appear monumentally boring right now, but when retail shelves remain perpetually empty, it becomes the cornerstone of every single meal. The objective in month 1 isn't existing like aristocracy. It's settling into a sustainable rhythm where every bite matters significantly. Then arrives shelter. Individuals drastically underestimate this component because they already possess a residential structure. But when the electrical grid is completely down, your residence isn't the secure, protective bubble you imagine it to be. You need to fortify your location, not with aggressive barbed wire or fortress-style walls, but with subtle measures that make you significantly less noticeable. Blackout window treatments prevent light from leaking outside during nighttime. Quiet behavioral routines prevent sound from traveling into the surrounding street. Even something as straightforward as maintaining trash completely hidden prevents individuals from realizing you're better supplied than they currently are. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The opening month is when desperation begins intensifying dramatically. And the precise moment someone realizes you possess more than they do, you transform into a target. And that leads directly into information blackout. This one impacts harder than individuals anticipate. No internet connectivity, no scrolling through digital news feeds or checking what's currently trending. Automated teller machines are deceased. Mobile phones cease functioning. And suddenly, you're completely severed from the informational noise you depended upon your entire existence. The only information that genuinely matters now is what's occurring directly outside your immediate door. Perhaps you've obtained a hand-crank radio to monitor local emergency transmissions. Or perhaps you've constructed the network of neighbors you genuinely trust. But in a reality without official communications, unfounded rumors propagate faster than verified facts. One incorrect piece of intelligence can position you in serious danger. The strategy is straightforward. Don't believe everything circulating. Don't disseminate anything unverified. And only react when you're absolutely certain. Panic thrives magnificently in the complete absence of reliable information. And the absolute last thing you desire is getting absorbed into someone else's chaotic situation. And then arrives the aspect nobody prefers discussing: maintaining an extremely low profile. This represents survival gold, and yet it's the most challenging for individuals to actually practice. Why? Because human beings fundamentally crave social connection. In a blackout scenario, it's tempting to gather with neighbors, to demonstrate you're managing adequately, to share what you've accumulated. But the survival community has a specific phrase for what genuinely works. Be the invisible person. Not the vocal individual distributing soup publicly in the street. Not the paranoid bunker defender showcasing firearms. Just completely invisible. The individual nobody notices, nobody questions, nobody specifically targets. That's the role you desperately want to embody. Don't boast about anything. Don't display possessions. Don't attract any attention whatsoever. The exact second you distinguish yourself, you become a perfect bullseye. By the conclusion of month 1, most individuals are either successfully adapting or catastrophically collapsing. The adapting ones are rationing intelligently, moving in complete silence, and constructing a daily routine centered around survival tasks, fetching hydration, cooking simply, and reinforcing shelter continuously. The collapsing ones are still desperately hoping things return to normalcy, wasting precious resources, leaving their residences illuminated like a brilliant beacon, or trusting dangerously wrong individuals. This is the month where you fundamentally decide which category you'll occupy. The second month, navigating social dynamics. If the opening month was about securing your fundamental basics, the second month is when social survival begins mattering profoundly. Nutrition is becoming scarce, nerves are completely raw, and individuals are awakening to harsh truth. This isn't just a temporary disruption. By now, grocery retailers are stripped completely bare. Supply infrastructure has vanished, and those who weren't adequately prepared are completely without options. That's when individuals turn toward each other. Some unite cooperatively, some attempt bartering exchanges, and others begin searching for vulnerable weak points to exploit aggressively. The game transforms from how do I ration my provisions to how do I manage everyone else who desires them desperately.
Trust transforms into the primary currency of month 2, and it's extraordinarily dangerous. Because here's the complication. Trust is precisely how individuals get themselves robbed, deceived, or worse outcomes. Display too much, and you paint yourself as the prosperous target in a starving reality. Conceal everything, and you risk alienating potential collaborators who could preserve your life eventually. The equilibrium is razor thin. One of the most intelligent lessons shared throughout preparedness communities goes as follows. Bury the majority of your reserves. Maintain just adequate provisions visible, perhaps 1 week's supply. So if someone comes investigating, that's absolutely everything they'll ever witness. To external observers, it appears like you're struggling identically like them. Behind the scenes, your genuine lifeline remains completely untouched. It's tactical camouflage, not exclusively for yourself, but for your entire stockpile. Blending seamlessly becomes an artistic skill at this phase.
You don't prepare meals that produce aromas like feasts when your neighbors are boiling weeds desperately. You don't leave packaging materials or containers accumulating to prove you've obtained stock. You don't even behave like you're adequately nourished, because in a reality of widespread hunger, slightly excessive energy or cheerfulness will make individuals deeply suspicious. This isn't about excessive paranoia, it's about survival psychology. When individuals are desperate, they observe everything meticulously, and even the smallest mistake can alert them. Simultaneously, you cannot adopt full hermit status. Month 2 is when communities begin forming organically, sometimes beneficially, sometimes destructively. Barter networks materialize. Neighbors check on each other, but so do opportunistic predators. There's perpetually someone who perceives community not as collective strength, but as exploitable leverage. They'll trade purely to investigate what you possess, and if you're not exceptionally careful, that trade transforms into a raid subsequently. That's why your principle in month 2 is straightforward. Connect cautiously, but extend trust extremely slowly. If someone desires to barter, you provide them something minimal, expendable. Never trade from your primary stock. Always convene in neutral territory, and never ever permit anyone to witness your actual reserves. Then there's the unspoken dimension of month 2, the invisible dangers. It's no longer exclusively about nutrition anymore. This is when profound exhaustion establishes itself. Individuals who've been burning candles and operating on pure adrenaline begin committing mistakes. Sanitation lapses trigger illness. Fatigue reduces defensive capabilities. Individuals become careless with fire management, careless with security protocols, careless with the exact routines that maintain their safety in month 1. And all it requires is one accident, like a cut that develops infection, or a careless statement to the wrong individual, for survival to completely unravel. Defense preparation becomes unavoidable here. Not aggressively charging into conflict, but preparing for the day someone tests your boundaries. It could be as straightforward as reinforcing doors and windows, establishing noise alert traps outside your residence, or deciding in advance how you'll respond if someone forcefully pushes inside. The objective isn't to provoke violence, but to survive it if it materializes. Because by month 2, you're no longer exclusively surviving the environment. You're surviving human nature. And human nature, when it's hungry and desperate, is exponentially more unpredictable than weather patterns. The 3rd month. Building long-term sustainability. By the time you reach month 3 following a catastrophic event, you're no longer in emergency response mode. The adrenaline has completely evaporated. The panic has exhausted itself entirely. Now you're in the grinding phase, where every day feels monotonously identical and survival ceases being about extinguishing fires and begins being about constructing a viable existence in the ruins. And here's the profoundly uncomfortable truth. This is the phase where individuals break fundamentally, not because of projectiles or empty stomachs, but because of fatigue, despair, and psychological collapse. If you want to survive beyond the initial 90 days, you require more than material supplies. You require a fortified mindset, an organized structure, and a plan that scales effectively. Let's begin with the most underestimated resource in survival: your physical health and mental morale. At this juncture, your body is adjusting to modified diets, reduced calories, increased physical labor, and deteriorated sleep quality. If you don't maintain yourself properly, minor injuries, infections, or just constant exhaustion will deteriorate you progressively.
Individuals drastically underestimate how rapidly morale collapses when there's zero comfort available. That's why intelligent, prepared individuals don't exclusively stock provisions. They stock morale enhancement items: coffee, tea, spices, even a deck of playing cards. Sounds ridiculous? It's not. When you've been consuming rice and beans for 75 consecutive days, a small amount of cinnamon sprinkled on oatmeal can feel extraordinarily luxurious. When your group is extremely tense, one game of cards can reset the collective tension. But month 3 also forces you to confront the trust dilemma. By now, your neighbors, distant relatives, and strangers have sorted themselves into distinct categories: those who are desperate, those who are dangerous, and those who represent potential allies. The trick is accurately identifying who is who. You cannot accomplish everything independently forever. It will deteriorate you eventually. But you also cannot simply throw open your supplies and declare, "Let's be friends." This is where trust circles become operational. Maintain your inner circle extremely small and ensure every individual in it contributes tangible value, whether it's medical expertise, nutritional knowledge, mechanical repair capabilities, or even just being someone you can genuinely rely on to remain calm under extreme stress. And here's where individuals usually commit two opposite mistakes. Either they isolate completely and refuse all social interaction, which eventually leads to burnout, or they overextend themselves, trusting too many individuals too rapidly and lose everything. The middle ground is diplomatic engagement. You don't need to be everyone's closest friend, but you need to understand the power of a simple barter system. By month 3, people's needs transform. The initial scramble for hydration and canned provisions has concluded. Now it's about strategic trade. Perhaps you've obtained extra salt. Perhaps someone else possesses medicine. Perhaps you've got coffee and someone else can perform sewing. Not every encounter should be about defending your stockpile with a firearm. Some should be about building micro-networks of survival that increase your odds in the long term. Here's an example. Suppose you encounter someone who raises chickens but possesses no salt. You've got substantial salt stored away. You don't have to trade your entire supply, just a portion. Now you've transformed your salt into eggs, which enhances your nutrition significantly, and you've created a bond with someone who possesses a renewable resource. That's the mindset transformation of month 3. Cease perceiving everything as loss and begin perceiving potential for scaling. Now, let's discuss resilience planning. Supplies don't persist forever. If you're still conceptualizing survival in terms of what's in your pantry, you're going to deplete eventually. Month 3 is when you begin scaling to renewable systems. That means foraging intelligently, learning what grows wild near your location and how to actually prepare it. It means fishing or trapping if you're in the appropriate area. It means initiating small, realistic gardening projects if your climate and situation allow. Even something as minimal as sprouting beans in jars provides you fresh nutrition when everything else is shelf-stable. And here's the critical point. You don't need extensive acres of land to begin building renewable nutrition. A few containers, some ingenuity, and the mindset of replace what I consume is adequate to begin building resilience. Another overlooked strategy is shelter improvements. By this point, your living space has been tested by weather conditions, fatigue, and possibly even intruders. Month 3 is the time to reinforce comprehensively. Patch leaks, insulate more effectively, and if possible, create redundancies. That could mean having a backup heat source, a secondary water filtration device, or hidden caches in case your main stockpile gets compromised. Intelligent, prepared individuals don't exclusively keep one stockpile in one location. They conceal secondary caches nearby, buried in sealed containers, disguised in plain sight, or stored with trusted allies. If someone robs you, you want them to take your decoy supplies, while your genuine lifeline stays protected. The final piece is scaling your survival beyond yourself personally. Whether that means teaching your children small capabilities, training your group in rotational responsibilities, or even documenting what you've learned in case you don't survive. This stage is about passing survival knowledge forward.
So in month 3, cease thinking like a refugee and begin thinking like a settler. You're not just surviving anymore. You're scaling operations, you're adapting continuously, and you're building a foundation that will outlast the chaos.
The hidden truths nobody mentions. Here's the brutal truth about survival that nobody includes in their neat preparedness checklists. The small things, the invisible factors, the human elements are what actually kill you or keep you alive after the first 90 days. Forget the Hollywood fantasies of bug-out bags, rifle standoffs, or some shiny freeze-dried meal kit solving everything. The real battlefield is between your ears, in your hands, and in how invisible you can stay when the world outside is crumbling. Let's break down what nobody tells you honestly. First, isolation and regret are as lethal as starvation. Individuals imagine they'll be rugged lone survivors, sharpening their knives and eating canned provisions by the fire. But here's the reality. Humans are fundamentally social animals. Your brain literally begins malfunctioning without social contact. Paranoia infiltrates, depression follows closely, and suddenly the motivation to ration, repair, or even cook disappears entirely. And regret, that's its own poison. Regret over not preparing earlier. Regret over mistakes in those first 3 days when adrenaline clouded your judgment. I've encountered accounts from disaster survivors who had provisions in front of them but didn't care enough to eat because their mind was shattered. Survival isn't just physical endurance, it's emotional stamina. And if you don't prepare for that dimension, whether it's by having a group, morale boosters, or even a written routine, you're starving long before your stomach growls. Second, plastic storage containers and ceiling gaps are better indicators of planning than firearms. Nobody showcases 5-gallon buckets or stacks of mason jars on social media. But when rodents pan-access your provisions and moisture can't spoil your rice, suddenly you're the one still eating, while others are panicking. Preparation isn't glamorous. It's not about stockpiling tactical equipment. It's about having 100 clean beverage bottles filled with water tucked into every closet corner. It's about sealing bulk beans into Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers instead of leaving them in a paper sack. Your storage capability, your ability to preserve what you already have, is the difference between 90 days of survival and 30 days of waste. Ammunition won't save you if mold consumes your pantry. Third, adaptability and improvisation actually outlive ammunition and farmland. Look, land is valuable. Firearms have their place, but the individuals who win in the long term are the ones who adapt. Improvisation is the ultimate prep. Can you make a heating device from a paint container? Can you transform a bed sheet into a water filter? Can you prepare oats 6 different ways so your kids don't rebel after the 50th bowl? The individuals who think they can plan for everything are the ones who crumble when their plan falls apart. Improvisers outlast everyone. The prepared person who stockpiled 1,000 pounds of flour but forgot yeast will be stuck. The one who knows how to capture wild yeast from the air will be baking bread long after. Fourth, staying visible means becoming predictable. This is a harsh lesson most people ignore. You light a fire every night at the same time. You run a generator every morning. Or you wear your preparedness uniform of tactical pants and boots. You've just painted a target on your back. Predictability is death after society breaks. The guy who looks ragged, eats quietly, and keeps his head down lives longer than the guy who advertises his preparedness. It's the gray man principle. Blend in, adapt, and stay unseen. Don't be the bullseye with loud lights, steady smoke trails, or fancy gear that screams, "I've got supplies." The best prepared person is the one no one ever suspects until it's too late.
Supplies help tremendously. Equipment matters. But the real game is mental leverage, invisible discipline, and building systems that don't look like systems to outsiders. It's about being boring in public, but brilliant in private.
It's about living 2 steps ahead where everyone else is still stuck in yesterday's desperation. And most importantly, it's about realizing that the hardest enemy you'll ever face isn't other people, it's yourself. So here's the final thought I'll leave you with. If you can't survive 90 days, none of your preparation matters. 90 days is the threshold where the panic ends and the new reality begins. If you can't endure that long, you don't get to play in the long game. You don't get to rebuild. You don't get to teach. You just become another cautionary tale. So ask yourself tonight, are you ready to endure, adapt, and stay invisible? Do you have what it takes to survive not just the first chaotic week, but the silent grind of the months that follow? Now I want to hear from you. Drop your best survival tip in the comments. I'll feature the smartest hacks in a future video. Smash that like button, share this with someone who thinks they're unbreakable, and subscribe for more no-fluff, real survival tactics. Remember, survival isn't about what you own. It's about who you become when everything disappears.